All right, what's up, everybody? So today we have a very, very, very special guest. We have someone who's very possibly the number one practical karate guy in all of North America. Someone who I'm connected with, one of the first guys I found on Instagram, and also someone who is very close with my sensei, Sensei Myers, Noah from Arizona Practical Karate, and yeah, his what is it on Instagram? It is the what is it? Karate Obsession. Oh, I almost spaced on it. Yes, the Karate Obsession. So we brought him on. He's again one of the guys who I kind of look to when it comes to bringing practical stuff to the rest of the world. And I just wanted to ask, how did you get started in the martial arts in general? Because I know you have a very long history, and yeah, you just let us know.
Well, long history is always relative. There are people out there who've been training, 50, 60 years at this point. But I started originally in 2006 at the age of 18. So I got a relatively late start for karate anyway. I started in Shuri-ryu karate originally, which is an eclectic American style. They label it an Okinawan style, but it really isn't.
Okay.
And it was put together by an American who collected a bunch of stuff from a bunch of different styles and put it together and changed it to be what he wanted it to be. It's an American style of karate. But I actually didn't start in karate intentionally.
Okay.
I was an anime nerd.
Weren't we all? Weren't we all? Isn't that everyone?
Yeah. And so I had actually been wanting to learn Japanese swordsmanship.
Okay. That is definitely that's not normal. That's normally not where people start off. So okay.
No, it's not. But that's where I wanted to start off.
Okay.
There was a kendo school in a city maybe 45 minutes away.
Oh, okay.
And it was one of those things where I thought, well, I really would like to learn Japanese swordsmanship. It would be cool. But I also don't want to drive 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back, each time for class. And then I started looking into how much it actually costs to attend kendo training, because in addition to the actual fees that you pay, to the club that you're training in, you have to buy all that armor and the shinai.
Hey.
And you're looking at, $400 for a cheapy set to get started.
So that's a rich man's martial art, as that's
a little bit. You need some seed capital to start in kendo.
It's a lot. Okay.
Or you need a kendo school that has lots of extra bogu that they don't need and they can loan you. But in looking around, I found that there was a karate school near me, 10 minutes away roughly, that did teach Japanese swordsmanship. They had one class every Friday where they taught sword.
Okay.
But you had to be a certain rank in karate to be able to even attend. I think orange belt or something. I can't remember what it was, but you had to train in karate first.
Okay.
And so I figured, okay, well, karate could be interesting. I'll give it a try. Joke's on me. I fell in love with that.
More over kendo.
Yeah, I did. I did, in addition to training in Shuri-ryu karate, in that same dojo, they taught judo classes periodically. They taught Japanese sword, and they taught kobudo, Okinawan weapons.
Okay.
And I attended all of those classes.
Okay.
So I was training 13, 14 hours a week in the dojo, and then spending additional time outside of the dojo practicing.
Okay. So you got very, very serious and a lot of traditional stuff. Not even like things that
very cool.
Yeah. These are systems that I normally wouldn't equate to. I mean, you just came out and was like, I just want to be a samurai, pretty much is what happened. You saw something and be like, I want to be a samurai. Let me get all the samurai lessons.
Basically.
I like it. I like it.
And the swordsmanship that they did wasn't technically kendo. They did let you do kendo eventually, but it was more the traditional, like you learn kata with EI with your draw on the kata, things like that. But yeah, and I did that super religiously for 2 straight years, ranked up to brown belt in 2 years, which is very fast.
Okay.
And then I moved. And so when I moved from Illinois to Arizona, with all my work schedule and where I lived and everything, there was not a karate school that I could attend.
Okay.
There was a judo school that had a late enough class that I could.
Okay.
So I kept doing judo. But for the time being, I couldn't attend any classes for karate. So I did practice a lot of my karate, obviously, by myself, which wasn't strange since I had been doing it before. I just didn't also have 13, 14 hours a week in a dojo doing it.
To help supplement it.
Right. So, I one of the first things I did when I moved out here was I found a cheap Wave Master punching bag on Craigslist. And, I ran kata in my living room every day, and I did a lot of research. I actually originally started a blog back then, which I think I called My Budo Geek Life, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Super cringy. And I only did that blog for maybe a year and a half or so, maybe 2, but that was mostly just for me to kind of collect my thoughts and write up some of the things that I'd been researching and finding in my research and learning in judo as well. And it took me 2 years before my work schedule changed and I moved to a different part of town to where I could attend karate classes somewhere.
Okay.
And so during those 2 years of training by myself and researching by myself, I figured out what I'd like to do. Because my initial intent when I moved here was, there are some Shuriru karate schools here because it was founded here originally.
Okay.
Phoenix. And so I was just going to find one of those and train in it and keep going up through the ranks. But after training by myself and researching for 2 years, I decided that's not the route I wanted to take, because I wanted to look into the really practical applications of the kata, and I wanted my karate to actually directly connect the kata to the self-defense and everything else. Because while I had learned kata and I had learned kihon and I had learned kumite, and there were formal applications for the kata you were supposed to memorize, none of it connected. Really.
Yeah.
There was self-defense techniques that we had that were good, but again, they were in no way connected to the rest of the things.
Gotcha.
Except in the broadest sense that all of them are, vaguely connected to fighting in some capacity. That's it. So, and I wanted something that was a little more cohesive as a system that actually made sense. And so then in 2010, I found who would become my sensei, Richard Pogue. I watched a class first. It was the first advanced class after a black belt test, as I recall.
Okay.
And so there were 3 people in it. I think everybody else took the night off.
Right after a major test, you might want to rest a little bit, and so you just came.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I watched that class, and I spoke with him, and I came and I tried out a class as well. When I came to try a class, it was actually just me Sensei Pogue, and then one other black belt who I later found was actually a Godan, who at the time my sensei was a Yondan.
Okay.
But there were a number of people who ranked higher than my sensei who trained under him.
Okay, that is different. That is different. Now, I've heard, obviously, because like I said, we share lineage, even though we haven't met. I've heard many amazing things about this man. Crazy. I've seen videos. I know he's amazing at what he did. But especially because karate is a place, not everywhere, but there's a lot of egos in karate, and you don't often see higher ranking people willing to study with people who are ranked lower than them in the same art. It'd be different if it was like a different martial art in the same art. That is extremely rare. So two things. I had a question earlier. Where did your because I know you wanted to find a system that was cohesive. I don't know, when I think of someone who's going out to master the art of the sword, the first thing I think they're thinking is not necessarily self-defense. They're doing it for the love of the art itself, not for self-defense reasons. Because I mean, I don't know what the laws are in Arizona, but in California, we definitely can't carry swords on our backs.
Oh, I definitely can in Arizona.
Oh, you
definitely can. Absolutely.
Oh, well, that changes the whole purpose of that conversation. You can carry
it. Does. But bear in mind, I started training in Illinois, where I definitely couldn't do that.
Okay.
But when I started, it wasn't about the self-defense aspect of anything, and it was just the cultural aspects and historical aspects and the cool factor, to be able to be like, oh yeah, I watched like 7 different anime where people were samurai, and I could do that too now. Break out Samurai Champloo and Rurouni Kenshin and Samurai Deeper Kyo and all that.
Rurouni Kenshin, the finale live action, just came out on Netflix. I was just watching it today.
Very apropos. But and when I started in karate, the practical thing didn't even come up for a while. I loved to collect kata. Just keep learning more and more of them. In that school, you weren't supposed to learn kata ahead of where you were supposed to be in the curriculum based on your rank. They wouldn't teach them to you, and you weren't supposed to practice them or anything like that. I regularly did. I watched the higher ranks run their kata, memorized them as best I could, ran them off to the side when nobody was looking. Attended little seminars to learn extra kata, which is why I don't remember the actual final count of all the number of kata that I have learned over the years. It's in the 40s.
Oh my.
Not counting weapons.
That's a lot of kata.
Yeah, today I could still pull off 33 of them.
Yes, that's so much.
In my own personal practice, though, I don't do that many. I've trimmed it down a lot.
That actually
to a core selection. And then every now and then I'll break out one of the other ones for, some extra study or exploration or just for fun. But I've pared it down quite a bit. But somewhere in that last probably 6 months of Shuriru, I started really realizing how much physically tougher I had gotten, which felt good. I had been bullied my entire life. I was always the nerdy, weird kid. And it just, it felt good to be good at something. And I felt relatively good at it. I mean, never perfect, but it felt like at least I could feel like I made progress. There were benchmarks for making progress, and you felt like, oh no, this was definitely better than the last one that I did, and things like that. So and it was a physical activity, which I was always terrible at.
Okay.
I was very good at video games. I was very bad at physical activity. And just that sort of thing started to get me more into, well, maybe being able to defend myself would be a good thing to learn. And I started getting more into the body conditioning aspect of karate, and I started looking into, even before I left, the last couple months, I started looking at application for myself, but I didn't have a good frame of reference for it because all the applications that we learned were very much like the JKA, old school. You block
feet away.
Yep. And then you're done with that guy. You turn and you do it to this guy who you knew was there from your spidey sense.
Yes.
It was very much that kind of application. So I was trying to use that application on kata I hadn't learned the formal interpretation of yet. So I was trying to do bunkai without a proper frame of reference, but I was trying. Okay. And it became really interesting to me. And I was like, I really need to figure this out. But the more you do that, the more you go, well, it just doesn't make sense to do it that way. So it was a somewhat gradual process to shift from that just cultural, learn everything, experience everything, to a focused study.
Okay. Very interesting. And then you came in to Arizona, found Sensei Poj, and went from there?
Pretty much. I started training with him. I literally only attended the one class before he moved to a different school.
How far was it away from you?
Not much farther.
Okay, because I'm like, if he moved 3 hours away, I was like, that's just heartbreaking. That would have been a heartbreaking.
Actually, no, it was slightly closer now that I think of it. Slightly closer. Okay. So it worked out, but he had been teaching out of a school that his parents owned.
So he came from a martial art family. I did not know that.
No, he came from a business owning family.
Okay.
With an interest in martial arts and friends who are martial artists.
Okay.
So they owned the school, did the business, hired instructors.
Interesting. Okay.
And they were friends with some old school Shuri-Ryu people and all kinds of things. So they had connections with different groups, and got him into training at the age of like 4.
Oh, okay.
So
grew up doing it. Makes a bit sense for the skill level of the man.
Yeah. But that him and his parents had a like a business falling out thing, and he had wanted to start his own thing. So he started his own program and his own dojo in another location. So I attended one class, watched one, attended one, and then he moved. And then I started training at the new location. And the curriculum was obviously very different. Shorin-Ryu and Shuri-Ryu have basically nothing in common as far as curriculum.
Okay, so totally different sets of kata.
Yeah. Out of all the kata that I knew, one of them crossed over.
Okay, yeah, that's very different. What is the lineage of your original system then?
Oh, people are going to get mad at me. So the official lineage, as I recall it, is the guy who founded it, Robert Trias, is an American in the Navy, I think.
Okay.
Golden Gloves boxer in the Navy, got stationed over in the Solomon Islands in World War II, I think. And supposedly while he was over there, he trained with a guy named Tongji Singh.
Okay.
And there's a whole little story of him like working out in the boxing ring, and this little Chinese guy coming in and asking him to trade, to teach him Chinese boxing, and then he gets his butt handed to him after he tells the guy no for a week. One of those kind of
one of those stories that you don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But yeah, he trains with him, and then supposedly that guy trained in Xingyi, which is a Chinese martial art, and somehow or another under Motobu Choki. That was never clarified to me when I was in the style as to how that worked, but apparently he trained with him.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right.
And so yeah, that's supposedly the it goes back to Motobu through him. As far as I know, nobody in the Motobu family has any idea who that Tongji Singh person is.
All right.
And I believe, if I remember correctly, Trias claimed to have been in the Solomon Islands longer than he actually was. And I think he got like in big trouble with that in the military for lying about how long he was stationed somewhere. I found him on a website about it at some point. All kinds of these things that make you go, I don't know how much of this is accurate and how much of it's not. And I don't want to get into the weeds too much on it, but that is the gist of it. I suspect that more than likely he learned karate on mainland Japan.
Okay.
Through connections with a couple different people. That's most likely where he got it. When he first moved to America and started up his own dojo, which was the first karate school, like official karate school, on mainland America, in like 1954, maybe? I don't remember when, but I saw some footage from the 50s or early 60s, and his curriculum was just Goju-kai curriculum. So, it's changed over the years, and all kinds of different things have been brought in, and he did all kinds of updates and changes, but that's the gist of it.
Oh, sorry. That actually makes more sense to me why your katas are so separate. So one of the reasons I picked training Shorin-ryu as my next system is because I came from Ueshiru, which has none of the similar katas, and that was actually one of my main reasons, was to go over to a place that had the other set of what are probably the most popular set of katas in karate, and that's why I chose it. So that actually makes sense. Now I see where the style has come, why they're so different. So yeah, that's interesting. You came kind of that same pathway.
Yeah, the Shuri-ryu curriculum as it is now is very much a blend of different stuff. So it's not the Goju-kai collection of just Goju kata that it was back in the day.
Okay.
But yeah, as far as the crossover goes, Naihanchi Shodan was the only one that I had from both. But it was also very, very different.
Like how different? I don't want to. I'm kind of do this later.
The stance was a very low kibadachi.
Okay.
So toes pointed forward.
Don't they do that in like Shotokan style?
Yes, they do. Except we were supposed to be very squared in the stance. So your shins were supposed to be vertical, and then your thighs were supposed to be as close to horizontal as you could. Like, it was supposed to be very squared, very much like you would do with shikodachi.
Aye.
But with your toes pointed forward, which hurts my knees and ankles so bad. It's terrible for you. It's so painful. But that's how you're supposed to do it. And Trias added a whole bunch of stuff to the beginning and end of the katas that he called mudra, which is an Indian concept, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
It's a little Naruto-ish. You've got like boom, boom, up here, all this different.
Wait, so you're like doing hand sign stuff at the end of each kata? It yes. Probably looks really cool, but I don't know if it's practical at all. So what was that?
No, there was a whole lot of like spiritual and philosophical stuff associated with those. So there's a lot of that in the beginning and end of the kata.
Okay.
And then there's you could tell that it's Nihonchi, but some of the things were changed to make more sense based on what he understood. And based on what I now understand, I don't understand why they were made that way. There is no double.
Okay.
The Chugeoke, where one goes up and one goes low. It was just one and then the other, and then like a low punch, which you then scooped up. The stacked hands that you'd pull before the double punch, he pulled it on one side, then the other side before doing it.
That definitely.
It's supposed to be like a grip break.
Okay.
And then the double punch was to the angle so that your fists could be, hit the guy at the same time.
Oh, so it's like a double.
Because he thought
there's a straight out.
Yes. That's how he saw it.
Okay.
So it made things, after I started learning the practical application based on the Shorinru version, looking back on that version is just very confusing.
Okay.
Like, I get why he did it for the applications that he taught.
But you don't
like I don't like that. But that's not to say that you can't find practical applications for the Shuriru Kata, because you absolutely can. But it's just one of those things where you look at it and go, but you had a kata already. Why you totally changed it?
But at that time, how many people were really looking for the practical stuff the way we are now? I mean, I'm new to seeing this version of the practical stuff. I've only been I was blessed. Weichi, which is my original system, is actually, in my opinion, one of the easier styles to translate. It's pretty straightforward in how the application is. Also, the actual founder of the system wasn't around when we had cameras and stuff on a regular basis still, and like it makes things a lot easier. And so I didn't have to start. It was when I started looking at other karates and also with my competition fighting, and started to recognize the things that weren't. I was looking, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I've done a little of this Shotokan here and this here. I'm like, this doesn't work in real life. And so I started looking at it, and then I ended up finding people like you and Ian and all that. And then I fell into this rabbit hole, and I'm like, oh my God, this is beautiful. How did I not know this existed this whole time? And so like, I just know, like, as much as now I see it all over the place, when I first came into karate, I wasn't seeing these practical, like, really usable applications I'm seeing today. So do you think that might have been a reason for the changes in the other system, or?
Maybe. I mean, I think that it was mostly just because he wanted to have a system that everything was consistent.
Okay.
So he had a very set way of doing application.
Okay.
His formal interpretation of the kata. And so if a kata that he added to the system didn't make sense for the way he did his application, he changed the kata so that it would all be consistent. Which I get why you would do that. You're trying to make a system that all goes together.
Yeah.
So that if you learn this thing and this thing,
they connect.
You're not learning weird, different things. Gotcha. They make sense together. So I get why he would have done that. And I can't fault him either for making karate popular in America, because honestly, without him, karate would have been a little garage hobby for people, and not anything more, most likely. He built the first karate competition circuit in America.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's how you spread a combat sport of any kind, is through competition. And the Okinawans weren't really big on it.
Yeah.
It's not that they didn't fight, but they weren't really big on the competing thing. That was very much a Japanese ideal. And so, there may have been some Shotokan schools that would have done it, but he was the first person to really build up a huge organization based entirely around competitions.
Okay.
And that really spread karate all over the place.
Okay.
And made it popular. And that's the kind of karate people cared about. It was competition. It wasn't the practical aspects. No. He taught and required his instructors to have practical self-defense techniques as part of their curriculum. Those were all solid. The self-defense techniques I learned were not bad by any means. They just weren't kata application. They weren't in any way connected to the kata.
Okay.
So they were great. The self-defense was fine. You did learn self-defense. It just was kind of disjointed from everything. It was the way that I saw it. Yeah. And again, you can always make the connection of, oh, well, you know, there's a punch here and there's a punch there. And, you know, you can get very broad with it. But there was no direct connection anyway.
Okay.
And I don't think people cared too much about that, as long as if you said you taught self-defense and you taught some self-defense techniques that made sense and were practical, okay. The kata was a separate thing. And then the kumite was a separate thing. And the kimon was a separate thing.
That is a normal.
I know Ian. Yeah, I know Ian really got into teaching the practical stuff in, like, I think the 90s.
Okay.
So it was a little bit out there already by the, you know, early 2000s.
Okay.
But not much. I distinctly remember too, when I started studying for myself after I had moved to Arizona, seeing some of these examples of people teaching application and not understanding how it fit the kata, because the only frame of reference I had was the, you know, I start the kata that way, so they're over there and they step in with a big punch, and then I turn and I do. That was my only frame of reference for kata application. And so I'm trying to find things that make more sense, and I see practical application, but my brain doesn't connect them very well. And it took a while, and it took a lot of reading and studying. So I found a lot of things that Joe Swift wrote, for example, and translated, and things like that were in articles on the internet. That was where I first came across Mabuni Kenwa's famous discussion of how, you know, the karate that was introduced to Tokyo is just a portion of karate, and the karate has more than punches and kicks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I found stuff from Toguchi sensei of Gojuru, who has the Kaisai no Genri, the guidelines for breaking down kata application, essentially, as he sees them.
Okay.
I started just kind of collecting all these bits and pieces and trying to figure out how it would all work. And after a while, you know, I had a vague idea, and I was like, okay, I at least know the criteria I'm looking for. I may not understand it all yet, but I know what I want to try and find. I want to try and find somebody who can teach me stuff that fits this sort of criteria.
Okay.
And Sensei Pogue did with what he taught. You know, he'd teach the kata, and then he'd straight up take a piece of the kata and show you how to, you know, smack somebody in the face, throw them on the ground, and break their arm with it. And he would usually show it initially in a way that was similar enough to the way I used to do it that I could see, okay, he might, you know, have them start, okay, if they're coming from over here, and you do this technique and you do this technique, you get into it that way. And then he would kind of progressively make it more realistic from there.
Okay.
So he'd initially teach it very like static and formal, so that you'd get the idea of what you were looking at and how it's the kata. And then you'd start making it
more
closer and with a realistic attack, and then with movement, and then with resistance, and so on.
Okay. And interesting. Okay. So, and then from there, you got, you know, delved into this. And then I know you had a YouTube channel with him for a while where you were breaking down the katas. And I know now you have, like, the Instagram you have that is very, very well known and popular. So how did that all get started, working with him and coming out and sharing it with him throughout the rest of the world?
Well, his thing was that he wanted to share karate with people. He wanted to teach people karate, and not just the karate everybody sees. You know, he wanted he wanted to show people the kind of karate that he liked to do, which was, it has practical application. And there's a mix of the sport fighting stuff that he had fun doing, and the kata application, and the supplementary training, and all, different skill building drills, the wide variety of things karate had to offer. And he knew that I was a technologically savvy person because I worked in IT. And despite him only being a few years older than me, terrible with computers, just absolutely terrible. But we kind of had just sort of casually discussed the idea of, well, we could, put together some videos of you just teaching some stuff. He was really, really bad on camera, though, when we first started.
Okay.
As far as speaking on camera.
Oh, did he stumble and things like that? Because that's
well, he stumbled, but he also just kind of sounded very robotic.
Okay.
It's kind of like the high school kid reading their essay, kind of a sound. In this essay, I will be discussing, and he knew it. He knew he was he was not the best at it. So it took a while, which is why the first year of our Waza Wednesday video series had no audio.
It was just you just showed that. That's hilarious.
And I edited it together with slow-mo, and I put captions on it. He agreed to all this. It's not like I did it behind his back.
Okay.
He knew. We discussed it frequently.
You just took the audio off. That's crazy. That's hilarious.
It was very hard to get him to slow down.
Okay.
So because he's so fast.
Wait, do you mean like so like just the speed of his movements?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you're watching him in those videos, that is his version of slow.
Okay. He moves. I have seen some like videos of him in seminars, and he'll do something that's like, I'm like, dude. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Imagine that for everything. What you don't always see is that he does go back and break it down move by move slowly.
Okay.
But for doing a little 3-minute video clip, you kind of need to just not do the super fast one in the first place.
Yeah, and just do the breaking downs. Okay.
Do it at like a teaching speed and breakdown. So it took a little while to tune that in. Okay. There were so many times where I was like, can you do that again, but slower? He's like, I did go slow. Well, I don't know that they're going to be able to see it on the camera anyway. So at the time, I was actually seeing some instructors putting video up of them doing kata application where they sped themselves up, and I could tell on the video. Meanwhile, I'm slowing him down on video.
This sounds very similar to the Bruce Lee rumor. I don't know if it's true, but there's this rumor going around that Bruce Lee was way too fast for all of the cameras, so they had to consistently ask Bruce Lee to slow down as well. And it's just funny.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate it is, but I mean, with film, you do have a limit of frames per second for sure.
So it's
funny. But I don't know how accurate that is, but it is similar. But no, so during the course of that, though, he was still like teaching to the camera as we went.
Okay.
And so even though I wasn't including his audio, he was getting practice at the talking bits.
The talking part.
And it basically got to the point where he felt like, okay, the camera is just a person. I'm just teaching a person that's standing right there. And he got much more comfortable at it. So then the next 2 years that we did it was all, with talking and everything. So it worked out really, really well. It just took a little while to get comfortable with how we wanted to do it. So that first season was kind of the trial run of doing it. And, after that we refined, okay, we can do it with the talking. We're both feeling more comfortable with the talking parts now. And going into the explanation without relying on the video editing so much.
Okay. Okay. And then, yeah, and I guess from there, did you start the Instagram around the same time, or was that a bit after?
Oh, I would say it was probably around the same time. I actually don't remember exactly when I started that. I started the Instagram account shortly after I rebranded my blog. So that Budo Geek blog that I had back in 2008, I discontinued that in like 2009 or 2010. But I had started another one that was mostly just for class notes. I don't even remember.
Interesting that you blog.
Most Budo no Kaizen. That was what it was.
Okay.
Continuous improvement of Budo, as Kaizen is continuous improvement.
Okay.
And yeah, it was just a little blog that was basically a little journal of the things that we went over in class. And over time, it started becoming, well, somebody would ask me a question. And I'd go, well, I could just write a response in the comments, or I could write a little article on the blog explaining it. And it just sort of kind of grew from there. So it went from being my own training notes to the occasional article along with it to explain it more.
Okay.
To just being straight up articles explaining things. And once I hit I'm consistently doing articles explaining things, I was like, this is really a different thing now. So I came up with sort of a brand and a website and moved my articles over, not my journal stuff, but my actual article content, and made the website just for instructional and informational articles. And shortly thereafter, I set up an Instagram and a Facebook page to go with it and went from there.
Okay. Very cool. And now you are, well, let me ask, where do you, now that you've, come out one of the most influential guys in this area, what do you do? What do you do when you're looking for, training now? Because I know you have your own school. I don't know, are you actually connected with any direct affiliation? Are you just working through, I know, through Ian's thing as well, possibly, I had heard?
So I am a member of the World Combat Association, which Ian Abernethy is the chief international coach of.
Okay.
And I am loosely affiliated with the Bugeikan on Okinawa, but not in any sort of official capacity. Okay. That is just by virtue of the fact that I train under Ulf Carlson in Kishimoto-gi. And he's a member of the Bugeikan. So for me to join would be something that I'd have to do the next time I go to Okinawa. I'd have to go there, visit, speak with them, and make it official that way. Okay. But those are my only organizational connections really at this time. COVID has made it so that I didn't really get out to train with anybody over the past year, other than the occasional person within my bubble for the longest time. Arizona's vaccination rate is still horrendous, so it's still something I'm pretty hesitant about. I did get my COVID vaccines, but at a less than 40% of our population being vaccinated is a little disconcerting. But it is something that I'm looking forward to being able to get out and train with more people in person. But in the meantime, been attending webinars with different instructors and doing some knowledge exchange here and there with people. Because I'm no longer part of like a style-oriented organization, I don't have any sort of limitation on necessarily who I could train with. It's just whoever's willing to train with me and teach me stuff.
Okay.
There are.
That's how it should be anyway, almost. Yeah.
It is. My sensei didn't ever have a problem with me going and training with other people. He told me to go do this seminar and bring stuff back, and oh yeah, train with those guys and let me know how it goes. But you know, under certain circumstances, some organizations get very finicky about how you do that. And then even aside from that, some people just don't want to be involved with some organizations. So, you know, oh, well, I'm a member of this organization, but that instructor refuses to teach anybody from there because there was a whole falling out and whoever knows what. So
some kind of back end.
Yeah, a lot of politics.
I will say one of the beauties of my system, Weichi, at least here in California, is there's not much politics, and I've been lucky enough that my instructors let me train wherever there's a weight group. We're all actually friends with each other. There's no issues, so we luckily don't have that right now.
That is always great.
Yeah.
Over the years though, I've made such a wide network of martial arts friends across the world that do all kinds of different styles. And the idea of not being allowed to train with people because they do a different thing is just ridiculous to me. And, you know, like I said, my sensei never would have stopped me from training with other people anyway, but it's a little more open anyway to not be officially under an organization that has restrictions on those sorts of things. But I know that there is a perception that people who leave organizations and don't have like, you know, one set instructor, because I don't at this point. My sensei passed away, and there's not. It's not that there aren't people who know more than me. There's lots of people who know more than me that I'd love to learn from. But as far as, you know, becoming a full-time student under them and, you know, switching under to their organization, whatever it is, and locking myself into whatever that curriculum is, that's not really appealing to me anymore. You know, my sensei and I had a lot of discussions of what would we change about karate and how we taught it if we could. Mm-hmm. You know, if there weren't any organizational restrictions, what would we do? And that's what I've done. So that does make it hard to have, you know, your go-to dedicated instructor. The Bugekan is nice because they don't particularly care what all you do, curriculum-wise. They've got one kata they want you to teach specifically. Other than that, though, whatever you want to do with your
very interesting. One
kata. Other than that, whatever you want to do.
That's different. I've never heard of something that's what kata is it?
Shuri Sanchin.
Oh, interesting. So I obviously have a Sanchin. I don't know if it's the same. I doubt it.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's very similar because it's a Sanchin.
Yeah.
And there's only so much variation in them. The Shuri Sanchin does have both a closed-handed and an open-handed version, though. So,
okay.
I mean, it's basically the same. It's just open hands or closed. Yeah. It's not that much different. But yeah, they teach that, which is something that's popular with Motobu Udundi.
Okay.
And I don't know how much you've seen of that. Overall, that style is very dance-like, and people like to call it like Okinawan Aikido.
Interesting.
People who do it hate that usually.
Not surprising.
But you know, it is aesthetically very similar. So that you know, you're doing a lot of joint locking people and moving them around with the joint locks. And it is very soft and very dance-like, which is actually something that Bushi Matsumura, the famous Bushi Matsumura, once even said that the martial arts of the palace were just too flowery and impractical. Udundi is palace hand, so he's probably talking about that kind of material, but
funny.
It's, yeah, that's not to say that it doesn't have good stuff in it, because it absolutely does. But if you're comparing it to karate, it very much is Aikido-like as opposed to karate-like. So
Okay.
I get the comparison.
Saying that that is something that would still have been practiced in the palace during a time frame where you might actually have to fight someone in that, manner, that it wouldn't be a bit more.
Well, they also have swords, so
That changes things. That does change things. They have swords and these cool little knives right next to them. Like,
yeah.
Right. You're right. That's true. That's a good point.
And also they had guys like Bushi Matsumura behind them, so they could afford to do the more flowery, dance-like stuff if they had a guy next to him who was willing to break somebody for them. And that's not to say they couldn't break somebody on their own, but it's not. When you watch it, you don't think, oh, those are practical fighting skills.
Got you.
You could definitely take the material and make it practical fighting skills. But, the way that it's generally practiced, very much like Aikido, you wouldn't generally make that connection immediately.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, well, I was going to ask this. So right now, you mentioned earlier that you don't do nearly as many kata as the 33 or so that you know right now. How do you pick and which katas you do? What are they like? How have you narrowed that down?
I narrowed them down by a couple of different things. So, for one thing, if there is something that I know, like an older version and a newer version of the kata, I'll tend to go with the older version.
Okay.
So Kusanku Dai, for example, as opposed to Kusanku Sho.
Okay.
Kusanku, they were both modified by Itosu, but Kusanku Sho was basically made entirely by him. And I would be more likely to take Kusanku Dai and teach its material.
Okay.
Especially if there's a lot of repetition in kata. If there's everything that's in the Pinan kata, I can find that in, Pasai, Kusanku, Chinto. Do I need to teach the Pinan kata? I do teach the Pinan kata to children. So I do, still practice them, but it's not something that I teach adults.
That's interesting that you say that, because I actually, one of the main reasons I picked the system I'm in is for the Pinans, not because I want to learn them because they're Pinans, because everyone seemed to have the Pinans. They were so popular, and I was looking for something to connect me to the rest of the martial art karate world. So it's interesting that those are something. Yeah. So, but apparently, but everything the Pinans can be found in those other katas, though.
In some variation, yeah. It might be to a different angle. The posture might be slightly different, but overall, most of it can be found in the other kata. And the few bits and pieces that can't, you could still teach those. You don't need a full kata because it's got one different thing in it.
Good point. Okay.
You can just as easily, while you're teaching Kusanku, go, and if you did this here instead, and get that worked in,
and you're good. Okay.
That's not to say there's not good material in the Pinans. There absolutely is. If you wanted to take the Pinans and just use them as your entire basis for practical karate, you could, and you would have plenty of material. It's not anything against the Pinans, but it's removing redundancy in my curriculum. So the children can learn them, and they'll have plenty of a basis to work from, as they're going into the adult curriculum. But the adults don't work them. They just start with, everybody starts with the Kihon kata that Chibana made. They are very, very simple, but I like them. They're not really even kata. Chibana's 3 Kihon kata, because they're basically just floor basics. You know, you go up the floor doing one thing, you go back doing another thing, and that's the kata, and then you do it again with a different set of things, and that's the kata, and you do it again with a different set of things.
Yeah.
And so it's basically just, you know, basics up and down the floor. So it's not really a kata in the true sense of it, but there's a lot of good stuff in those, even though they're very, very simple and basic.
Okay.
So I like to start everybody with those because it very explicitly teaches you hikite and what it's for.
Okay.
It's hard to deny when the first move of the kata is reach out, grab, pull while you're punching. Like the first move.
That's pretty obvious.
Yeah, the first move tells you exactly what that's for.
I like you like that.
Not to mention the way that it shifts your body with the stance is helping teach you how to move weight into a punch.
Okay.
You've also then got different limb control types of techniques going back. So it's very simple, but there's a lot of good material in the Kihon kata. So I do teach those still to everybody. Children then go through the Pinan kata. Adults go through the Naihanchi kata.
Naihanchi are currently.
Naihanchi is the best. Everything is Naihanchi.
Yeah, it's interesting because in Weichu everything is Sanchin. Now I'm like, but everything might be Naihanchi. I don't know.
Hey, Sanchin is just Naihanchi going forward and backward.
Exactly.
That's all of it. But the Naihanchi kata are supposed to be the core of Shorin-ryu. That's kind of like how it's always been intended and what people will usually say. Not everybody actually teaches it that way.
Okay.
They kind of just, here are the Naihanchi kata. You learn them and memorize them, get good at them. Those are important. And then now learn these.
and totally forget.
Well, you don't necessarily forget them, but you move on anyway. But basically the way that I see it is no matter what other applications you're working, you can always fall back to Naihanchi. Naihanchi is always your fallback, your frame of reference and your structure that you need and your basic mechanics and your basic frames and things like that. So you can always fall back to Naihanchi.
It's interesting because I remember just one of the things that happened. I was back when I first learned Naihanchi. I posted a bit about it on I posted a version of me doing it on my Instagram, and somebody was like, that kata is too advanced. You should wait until you have your, because in their system, it was like a black belt kata. And I'm like, but in my system, it's a yellow belt kata. And when I told them that, they actually backed off. And it's interesting. I don't know, your story just kind of brought that back to my attention, how like you guys see it as a basics, other people see it as an advance, and how depending on the style, will like, they're so strict on those things. But yeah.
I know a lot of like Japanese styles of karate in particular like to teach Naihanchi or Teki as black belt kata. They don't generally teach them before that. And the only explanation that I've ever gotten is just that they're weird in comparison to the other. There's no, you don't turn in them ever. There's no kick. There's
they're a little weird.
It's all done in a weird stance, going side to side. So the only explanation I've ever got for that is that they're weird and different. And if you did them at an earlier rank, they'd be hard to do.
They're not, I don't think they're difficult to do. They're weird. I'll give you weird. They are weird compared to.
Yeah, it all depends on your frame of mind, really, because if the only thing that you know are the Pinan kata, and then somebody goes, okay, now try and do Naihanchi Shodan. It will be real weird. You won't have done the stance ever before. And this side to side thing is going to be very strange. You won't have done the Namigaeshi before. So I can see if you start your training with the Pinan, like a lot of Japanese styles do, they start with the Heian or the Pinan kata. Other than the Taikyoku, I'm not counting those, but they a lot of them teach the Taikyoku kata. But yeah, if you're basing everything around the Pinans, then yeah, by the time you go through all the Pinans and then you learn Naihanchi, it's weird.
It is, yeah.
But if you learn Naihanchi very early on, I mean, it's not any weirder than learning Pinan Shodan the first time.
Yeah,
You don't have this preconceived notion that it's going to be hard.
I think so. A lot of that is just mentally what you're preparing for, what you think is difficult versus what really is.
Yeah. You know, and of course, somebody tells you it's a black belt kata, you're gonna.
It's way more difficult.
Yeah. Magically, it's way harder.
I'm a first grade teacher, and one of the I just read an article where it shows that teaching kids math when you don't tell them it's math is easier than after you tell them it's math. Like, the thought process that math is supposed to be hard actually makes it more difficult for kids to learn it. And I feel like it's probably something similar. If you tell them it's a high level, difficult black belt kata, all of a sudden it's difficult instead of just another kata, which is all it is.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So so what katas, I mean, you named the ones you went over. Is that all you, how many was that be total for you then? Not including the Pinans for the kids. How many is that total?
Well, there's the 3 Kihon kata, which again, you don't really you can call them kata, but they're iffy on whether or not they're really kata. So the 3 Naihanchi kata, Pasai, and Kusanku. Okay. I don't teach 2 Pasai and 2 Kusanku in the standard curriculum. I do Tawada Pasai. Some people call Matsumura Pasai, but I don't find that to be as accurate as Tawada Pasai. Okay. And Kusanku Dai. And for those who are going for black belt, they get a selection of options to learn.
That is different. Okay.
Yep. Well, if you think of how karate was originally taught, it was customized to the person learning. It was, you know, okay, this would suit you best. Okay. And I'm kind of going more that route. Okay. So, you know, there are some people that Shinto, just not their thing. Okay. And forcing somebody to learn Shinto as part of the requirements when they're just going to hate it the whole time and never learn anything from it, not that useful. Okay. You know? And I hate to pause here, but my battery's running low, so I got to go grab my cord.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
So I'll grab my power adapter and be right back.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
All right. Sorry about that.
No problem. It happens.
Thought my battery would last longer. Okay. Yeah, basically for somebody going for black belt, you can, I do want them all to learn Shuri Sanchin, because that is part of the Bugekan curriculum. And as a black belt, that would be something they could really start diving into if they wanted to. Okay. I do teach Kishimoto-ri, but it's not like my standard curriculum with the belt ranks and everything.
Okay.
Because Kishimoto-ri doesn't have a belt system.
Okay, I'm actually not familiar with this.
Okay. So Shuri Sanchin is not technically part of Kishimoto-ri. Okay. But it is the standard required kata of the Bugekan where Kishimoto-ri is taught. Okay. Kishimoto-ri is a system of 4 kata. Tachimura no Nahanshi, Nidanbu, Tachimura no Pasai, and Tachimura no Kusanku.
Okay. Okay.
So Nahanshi, Pasai, Kusanku, and one extra.
Okay.
That were all passed down through this side lineage, basically, that it didn't involve Itosu. So it basically, the Tachimura name that is on those kata is basically calling back to a student of Sakugawa named Tachimura, who also had the Bushi title. So Bushi Matsumura wasn't the only Bushi.
Okay.
On Okinawa, that's a title you get as a warrior class of.
Yes.
Tachimura also had that title, and he was a contemporary of Matsumura. I think he was older than Matsumura, though, if I'm remembering right.
Do you know, as you go through? So I know Bushi is like a warrior title. It's like, but I don't. Do you know the history behind the exact meaning of the word? Because I know it's a warrior title, so I recognize that.
The exact translation is basically just war person.
Oh, interesting.
Like martial person. So Bu in the first part, Bu like Bushi, Budo, Bushido is martial.
Gotcha.
Or having to do with war in some capacity, and Shi is a character for defining like a person.
Got you. Okay.
Similar to like Shihan.
Okay.
Well, either Hanshi or Shihan has the same kanji in it, and I can't remember which one off the top of my head. One of them has the person
the person kanji in there.
Yeah, more or less. I try to remember Japanese things, but I am not a linguist, nor am I in any way fluent in Japanese.
I am trying to learn it, and it is one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
It is difficult. I had a tutor for a few months before I went to Okinawa just to try and nail it in there. But when you don't have to use it conversationally, you lose it.
Yeah.
But in any case, Kishimoto, because it didn't go through Itosu, it didn't get put into a school system, it didn't get popularized, it didn't start getting taught to large groups of people. It went from Tachimura to a couple students of his. I don't think he had very many though, just a handful. And Kishimoto Soko, the style is named Kishimoto-di. He added the Nidanbu kata as kind of a connector kata that bridges Nahanshi to the other two.
Okay.
And so it's named for him because he's the one who added something to it.
Okay.
And then he taught it to several people. I think two of whom went off and started their own styles completely with it, completely changing some of it. So one guy founded Gensei-ryu, which you can still find videos of online. It's kind of like if you took Kishimoto-di stuff and Shotokan stuff and mashed it together. And then one guy, actually it might have been the same guy, made Taido, which is more of a like acrobatic athletic thing. It's not so much intended to be combative and martial. It's more supposed to be like, not exactly parkour.
So like, is it like tricking them? Not kind of like martial art tricking?
A little bit. It's I would say closer to like capoeira. Like they take fighting movements and it's not turned into a dance, but it is sort of extrapolated out into these athletic versions of those martial techniques.
Okay.
The fun thing is you can actually take Taido stuff, which looks like wild and jumping all over the place and stuff. If you just shrink it down, it fits back into the Kishimoto-di material.
Oh, so
like you can see, if you shrink it down, and take some of the jumps and spins and rolls and fancy stuff out, and you shrink their basics down. It's just the basics from Kishimoto-ri that have been expanded into this athletic thing. So I mean, you can still see the connection if you look for it, but it's a very rare system because it's really only taught in the one organization, the Bugeikan. It wasn't even like considered its own style until fairly recently, which was done specifically to preserve it.
Okay.
Because it's not popular. If you've seen me run Tachimura no Nahanshi and Nidanbu and Tachimura no Kusanku, for example, those kata will not win you tournaments. There's not, Kishimoto-ri doesn't do the kime thing. There's no snap and crisp locking into place that they want. There's bobbing up and down because you change level in your stance. There's no ki.
I hate ki personally, so I'm okay with that. But
I love ki when I'm hitting things. When I'm not hitting things, don't do it as often. But the Kishimoto-ri also, because it's only 4 kata, people tend to see learning new kata as the next step in progression, along with, okay, I learned this new kata, I get this new belt. I learned this new kata, I get this new belt. So it doesn't fit in with the mainstream idea of karate and what people want to learn. And so the Bugeikan teaches several different systems. You can learn Motobu Udunbi, the palace hand that I was mentioning, that's very dance and Aikido-like. Mm-hmm. You can learn Hanashiro Chomo's version of Shorin-ryu. Okay. And he was one of Itosu's students. And you can learn Kishimoto-di. And you can also learn Yamane-ryu Bojutsu. So bow techniques and kata. So they teach a variety of different things, and you can basically just pick and choose. But most people do the Hanashiro Chomo Shorin-ryu because it has a belt system, and it has kata you can do in tournaments, and it's more
fun to have a huge community where you can go and compete with other people and
it's the more mainstream thing. So the 4 Kishimoto lineage kata, not very many people were wanting to learn them.
Okay.
Because, well, it doesn't help me, progress in my rank, and I couldn't compete with it really. So why would I learn it? Sort of a thing. I mean, you can compete with it. I just imagine it wouldn't do well in a tournament.
Yeah.
I should try one of these days. Just join one of those and run a Kishimoto-ri kata and just see how bad I do.
I'll tell you this. I change up. So the Weichi kata, I also think naturally don't always do super well, especially if you're in a place where they're not doing a similar style of kata. So what I actually did is I took my best Weichi kata. I went over to my brother's. He does American karate, so it's a version of like Taekwondo. And started. They have a bunch of medals. I went in. I was like, listen, I want to compete. Can you spice this up for me? And so we spent a few weeks, and we slightly changed, like, okay, so I know you don't do this, but turn your head here, look over there hard, then turn and do this. I'm like, and so I do the same movements, but like the exaggerations are like in the wrong place, and they're all different. But I won gold, so there it goes.
But that you got to do that kind of thing sometimes. Yeah. But yeah, so I think in 2011. A small group of students at the Bugeikan kind of pitched it to officially name it Kishimoto-di, so it's its own. Those 4 kata are a system.
Okay. Because
they all go together. They all, all the applications build on each other. All the principles build on each other. And interestingly, the applications for those kata are all taught along with the kata. Not one of those like you've got to go back and reverse engineer stuff. It's literally you're going through the kata. Now that doesn't mean they're the original applications necessarily, because who knows whose version of applications they are over the course of the lineage. But at the very least, you are learning the same kind of applications that were taught to the instructor, who were more or less taught to him by his instructor, at least that far back.
Okay.
You've got to, you know that they've kind of gone through somewhat of that tradition of passing material down. And there are things that make sense, which is helpful. And it's interesting because as I've studied that style, a lot of the things that I've seen from older books and things that were written and said by Motobu and Mabuni and Nakasone and Itoman, all these different people who we have these old books from, stuff that they wrote that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, or seems like, oh, it's too bad we don't have that anymore, that like that it seems lost or out of context, starts to fall into place. Like, oh, that's what you mean. That's what that's talking about.
Okay.
So it's really cool in that historical aspect as well, to go, oh yeah, we just teach it that way. And after you've learned it, you go, oh, well, this thing that Motobu said makes perfect sense now.
And it starts kind of bringing everything together.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's really cool from that respect. But yeah, so it only became a named style because, again, the naming of styles wasn't really a thing until the 1930 something summit of the Masters, where they named everything.
From there. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking, but like
I've got a stack of books over here. I can pull one out and find it again. But the meeting of the Masters, and they all got asked the names of their styles, and they officially named things. But prior to that, it was just, oh, it's that guy's martial art.
Yeah.
It's this guy's karate. It's that. So, it was.
I remember even Genshin didn't like the idea of separating them and naming them like that. And again, that I think leads to the whole where you can't train with every single person because you have a name on it, and you got to be with this group, which I think is a huge disservice to what we do. Just comparing it to like martial arts that are really active now, like you compare it to like jujitsu or the popular ones. They don't care who you train with, where you train from. They got you with something, bring it over here so we can do it too. Like that's their whole, and I really like that thought process of training.
The thing is, though, is I suspect that BJJ is going slowly along the same path, though.
I've heard.
Because if you, well, and even if you just look at it from the historical lens of how karate was changed over time, it was originally just everybody doing whatever with no name.
Mm.
And then, well, you had to be a little more specific. So it's, the way this guy does it, it's, Itosuha karate.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's this guy's version, or it's from this place. It's shurite, and then eventually enough people got to be doing it, and there became enough variation that people started to want to clarify
who's this
more specifically.
Yeah.
And they started having enough students to where you needed to name it more broadly, because if you look at like organizations, okay, if you wanted to say you're doing Nakazato ha Shorinryu, for example, the Shorinryu that's taught by Nakazato. Okay, well, you can say that, but you're not learning it directly from Nakazato, are you? You're learning it from one of his students or one of his students' students.
Yeah.
So how much, drift is there in there? How much individual personality is there? So you start to be, okay, let's just name this a little more broadly, because there's a whole bunch of instructors now that teach all the same kind of stuff. So I think you already have a bit of a rift in the jiu-jitsu community of the Gracie jiu-jitsu versus Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then there's 10th Planet.
Actually, at my gym, the jiu-jitsu that we teach actually does have its own name. The guy has a fourth dan in judo, who was a wrestler, I think in college, that had, because I don't, and I actually learned from his student, so that's why I'm trying to think about it, because I haven't met the actual head dude. And
Right.
he also has this
Yep.
black belt in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And now he has his own kind of system and his own style of teaching it.
Yep.
Which, I mean, yeah, so I definitely do see jiu-jitsu getting about 50 million different styles. I just hope that it doesn't reach the point where you can't train with them, because they're Gracie and we're 10th planet and you can't mix. And that I'd start getting real annoyed.
I've already heard of that happening here and there, so hopefully it doesn't keep going. But I have occasionally heard of that rivalry becoming a little more
karate
of an actual roadblock.
Man.
So we'll see.
But I want.
No, but I think that is somewhat the nature of martial arts when you start teaching it publicly. I think that's just kind of part of it. You're going to have, if you're going to teach it publicly, you're going to start teaching more people. You're not just going to have like your little group of, friends and relatives that you're teaching, who are just going to, train what you teach them and, do whatever they want to it and maybe teach a handful of people. It's no longer that. It's this, okay, I'm going to teach 500 people. And out of these 500 people, I'm going to have 10 of them that are going to become instructors, and they're going to go off and teach 500 people. And, once you've got that exponential growth going, I think it's kind of inevitable that you're going to have a lot of people want to put their individual mark on it.
Yeah.
And I just get hesitant with the naming of styles thing. Jiu-jitsu has been fine so far in doing the like, oh, this is Kyle Terra's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and this is I'm trying to think of Machado Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they just put their name on it, and it's their version of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's fine. That's very much like the Shurite, or it's Itosuha Shurite. It's not too stylistic, but like, okay, I dropped a whole bunch of kata from my curriculum. Is it a new style now? No. I teach Shorin-ryu very differently from how it's taught, in the headquarters on Okinawa.
But it's still Shorin-ryu.
It's still Shorin-ryu. I'm not going to say that I invented a new style. It's my take on it. It's how I want to do Shorin-ryu and teach Shorin-ryu. I'm not going to say that
Noah's Shorin-ryu karate.
It's my Shorin-ryu. And once I teach it to you, what you do is your Shorin-ryu, and that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to just copy me forever.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people in traditional martial arts are very big on the must do exactly like sensei does.
That is 100%. I have a close friend that I train with who he's no longer, but he was very much, and we were both kind of at this in the beginning. So this is not a bash on him, but it's very much like, how did they do it 200 years ago? Because I was obviously better than what we're doing now. Obviously, no reasoning as to why it's better, but because it's older, it's magically better, and that's just how it works. Yeah.
That is a popular logical fallacy, and I do get that a lot with, because I keep the older versions of the kata rather than the newer ones. Personally, it's because the applications that I've worked out for the older kata are better techniques to me.
That's a good personally. Reason. That's a good reason.
That's not to say that it's bad. Pasai Sho, Itosu's version of Pasai, which most people would know as Basai Dai. It's not that it's bad. It's just that the techniques in it aren't quite so mean and to the point for me. And I'd rather just go straight to the, finish this and be done kind of techniques. And you can certainly find plenty of those in those versions. I just find the ones in the older kata better.
Okay.
And maybe that's just the way that I approach the applications. That, you know, that could be entirely on me. But it makes sense to me to do it that way. And as far as the way they did things, you know, older being better, I don't necessarily see the older being better, but I think that there is value in looking at the historical origin and intent when you're looking at a kata-based martial art, a forms-based martial art. You know, these kata have been handed down for generations. They have been changed, no matter how many times they insist that they're not. They've definitely been changed, but you've got still the basic formula of this template of material that's been handed down. So it's not necessarily that the older stuff is better, but the older stuff was more likely to actually be combat based.
Than the newer.
Whereas after a certain point, that was no longer the intent or the focus. And so a lot of the applications were just, okay, you want to know what that is for? Sure, I guess. Block a kick. Like, yeah.
Or let's make the stance deeper because it looks better for competition type situations.
Or it makes your legs stronger or something like that. Yeah. You know, so when it's not so much that older is inherently better, it's just that older was more likely to be the same focus that I have in my.
No, that makes sense.
But you know, I'm also not. If I see a historical, if they pulled out a photo of Bushi Matsumura demonstrating a kata application that I thought was dumb, I wouldn't immediately, we need to do that one. You know, if it doesn't make sense to me, I'm not going to do it just because somebody used to do it.
Got you.
But if it makes sense in the way that I look at karate, then I'll incorporate it.
Okay, that makes sense. I do remember. I want to get into before because I know we've definitely gone a little. I don't mind. We've gone a little longer than I anticipated. I know you had an MMA fight and some MMA training. Where did that come into the story? Because I thought you mentioned maybe going to an MMA gym or something like that, and it hasn't.
So I actually have not ever trained in an MMA gym.
Oh, interesting.
I've never trained in an MMA gym. I did judo for 4 straight years doing judo. And even when I started training with my sensei, he had a jujitsu class every week where I got to continue working that kind of stuff. And even when he kind of discontinued the specific jujitsu class, we still worked throws and things and groundwork in regular classes and in sparring. So I got to continue working on my grappling techniques regardless.
Okay.
Weirdly, I got better at my judo after I stopped doing judo.
That I'm going to pretend like that makes sense, but it definitely doesn't.
Well, yeah, there's a difference between doing like Olympic judo.
Okay. Yeah.
And doing judo the way it was originally meant to be done.
Okay.
And I think learning the tactile sensitivity and the close range fighting of kata from my sensei made, in general, my awareness of balance better.
Okay.
So instead of just trying to commit to the throw, no matter what, throw the guy the way that you do in Olympic judo, I was much better at just waiting for them to be off balance and throw them down.
Gotcha. Okay. More finesse.
Rather than trying to force it.
Okay.
But essentially what ended up happening with the MMA thing, I took a couple MMA classes with a guy who kind of occasionally coached MMA. He was more of a like personal security bodyguard kind of guy.
Okay.
He had some MMA experience and he taught some MMA classes. I took a couple with him as well, but he was kind of guest teaching in my sensei's dojo at the time. But I was a brown belt still. I hadn't earned my black belt yet when I did that MMA fight, but I had essentially thought, well, I want to test myself. I want to see how well I can do this stuff under pressure. I've been doing it well enough in sparring. I've visited, Kyokushin dojos and not felt, like a fish out of water. Um, you know, Goju people, Muay Thai people, gone and sparred and trained with all these different styles, and I never felt like a fish out of water or like I was in over my head.
Okay.
My sensei had done a good job of giving me a well-rounded martial education. And we did enough conditioning and enough hard sparring to get comfortable with all that. And honestly, sparring with my sensei was basically MMA sparring anyway.
Okay.
Even when he was doing like point style sparring, which was rare, to be honest, he did one class per week where he taught tournament focused stuff.
Okay.
Out of like 27 classes he taught in a week.
Oh, okay. So he was
one of them was for tournaments.
Okay. He was not focused on that.
He liked them. They were fun.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the focus either.
Yeah.
But he would occasionally spar in that style. He'd still hit pretty hard. But also, like, if you got close enough and it started to become a clinch match, then it was a clinching match. And if you took each other down, then it was time to work groundwork. And
okay, so that's just MMA. You just turned it into the whole thing.
Yeah, like that's just how he sparred all the time.
Okay.
With me, so it wasn't like it was weird to go from striking to clinching and stand-up grappling to throws and takedowns and then groundwork and submissions. That was all part of how we sparred on a regular basis. Okay. Not even including like sticky hand sparring and self-defense based sparring and self-defense scenario drills and things like that. And you would do your occasional, okay, we're focused on just striking today, no grappling, or this guy's the kickboxer, this guy's the grappler, go. Things like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I was effectively training in mixed martial arts anyway. I was mixing karate and judo, and
that's what it was in the beginning when we first started it.
Yeah. So I figured, well, let's see how I do. And it took me a bit to find an organization that actually I felt comfortable with, because a lot of them out here like to do fights on like reservation land where they don't have to follow state guidelines.
Yeah, I'm aware of those.
Which I was not super thrilled with.
Yeah.
So I did find one that I felt comfortable with. They did end up doing some weird, shady stuff, but that's kind of to be expected from what I found out.
Wait, what did they do? Now I'm curious.
Well, they changed my opponent a few times.
Okay.
One of those times they tried to have me paired up with a guy who had like 8 fights and owned a gym, so he trained full time. And I'm like,
this is your first time,
like
right?
that is not, yeah, I feel like that is not an appropriate match for the guy who works a full-time job and then goes to train and has never had an MMA fight before versus guy who's had 8 fights already and trains, 8 hours a day, then teaches another 6.
Yeah, no.
I feel like
okay. They're trying to set you up right there.
Right. And I called them out on it, and they changed my opponent. And I actually was supposed to fight a guy from a local MMA gym that they had a good reputation as being a good gym with good people, and I was actually looking forward to that.
Okay.
And then like 3 weeks out, they changed my opponent again to a guy who had 3 fights, which he had won in the first round by finishes. 2 knockouts, 1 submission.
What are they doing?
But I went ahead and I just went with that one. I took that one.
That's for your first fight ever. That's a pretty extreme matchup. For your first fight
was a wrestler. He was a wrestler.
Okay.
And I watched 2 of his 3 fights I found on YouTube. And I found he does the same thing.
Okay.
He's got one thing that he does. So I went, okay, well, over the next 3 weeks, we'll train for specifically that.
Okay.
So, working with my sensei, we worked a lot of takedown defense because wrestler, but also a lot of right leg roundhouse kick to the head.
Okay.
Because the one thing that he did
Is he dropping a hand?
Was drop his left hand, his lead hand, to grab your knee while throwing an overhand right, which leaves this big window with nothing protecting his head.
Okay.
Where he was perfectly open for a right leg kick. So we worked that a lot. And the day the fight comes up and, I weigh in and stuff, I am real sure he didn't make weight.
With this current promotion, I wouldn't be surprised if they just found a way to wave that under the rug somehow.
Yeah, well, I made weight at 171 for welterweight.
Okay.
I could not do that now. Not at all. I could not do that now. I am confident he was not 170 by any stretch of the imagination.
Okay.
But he refused to shake my hand even. Beforehand, he wouldn't touch gloves in the ring. If I remember correctly. He wouldn't even actually warm up in the locker room area with everybody else. He went out in the hallway. Okay. It was pretty clear he felt. Meanwhile, Benson Henderson is in the locker room warming up one of his guys who's going to fight that night. Okay. But sure, you're better than everybody else.
Yeah, you're better, including the UFC vet. Well, I guess he had, maybe not at that time.
Oh, he was. Yeah, he was in the UFC at that time. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But it was a little tense, I guess. But then we go out there to fight, and I hear them announce him as making his pro debut.
Wait, hold on.
Now, that's a little irritating right off the bat because, that means he's getting paid and I'm not. But also, there is the whole, in Arizona, there are different rules for amateurs and pros.
And pros, very different rules. Okay. This whole event seems so illegal in my head right now. How do you have a pro fighting a brand new amateur? It just seems so illegal. Okay.
Yeah. So,
oh my God. I
hear that and my brain immediately goes, does that mean that I can knee him in the head? Or no? Is that what can I do and what can't I do now? So that threw me off right off the bat. Trying to figure out what was legal for me and what wasn't. Are we following pro rules or amateur rules? But the bell rings and we're in it. And I knew that I was going to have some adrenaline response of some kind. I had competed in competitions before for karate and judo, and I had, sparred and all kinds of stuff. But I knew I had also never fought in a cage in front of basically a theater full of people while streaming on the internet and television.
So I'm like on the internet and on TV for your first thing.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. Yes. Okay.
So I was like, I know my adrenaline is going to go nuts. I know this. Problem is, I don't know what it's going to do.
Okay.
So turns out what it did was give me tunnel vision and stretch everything out. So he looked really far away.
Okay.
Which is why he popped me in the face first thing. And I didn't move or block because I didn't think he could reach me.
Oh no! Oh, so you're that? Oh no! Okay.
So my range was totally off, and then I kind of chased him I barely touched him with a leg kick, and I should have followed him into the cage and started my clinch work and stuff, but I didn't think I could reach him. Oh, my distance was so far off.
Yeah.
And And he ended up then taking me down with the one thing we knew he did.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, great. Obviously, my distance is totally messed up. Can't rely on it. So I played defense on the ground. It looks really bad in the video because it looks like my head is getting bounced all over the place by his punches. And actually, the ref afterward had even said he considered stopping it, but figured I was still okay.
Okay.
What it looks like he's smacking my head all over, and what's actually happening is me moving my head with all the punches.
Okay.
So, like, if you look at the pictures of me after the fight, I have burns on my face. I don't have a bloody nose. I don't have a black eye. I don't have bruises. I have burns on my face.
Fighting it with on the mat.
Yeah. So from his gloves.
From his gloves. Aye.
So it looks bad. I didn't even have a concussion after all those punches. Like they checked me out, and the doctor checked me out. I'm totally fine.
Okay.
His punches did nothing except make me bite my lip once. That was unpleasant. That was the worst part.
Okay.
I bit my lip. But it looks really bad on video. And I tried to armbar him a couple times, and he literally just picks me up and slams me on the ground.
That happens.
So I'm like, all right, well, this is really annoying and frustrating. And clearly I'm not going to be able to get an armbar on this guy because he's just too strong. So I'm like, well, I don't want to finish this round on my back. So I waited for the 10-second clacker.
Okay.
Heard the clacker, immediately turned over and kind of stood partway up.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I know he's going to go for my back. I also know he's not going to tap me out in 10 seconds.
Got you.
So at least I can end the round not on my back. It may still be a 10-8 round, but at least I won't end on my back, and that's a start.
Okay.
I go back to my corner and I wash my mouth out because I bit my lip. And my sensei's given me advice on, to try switching, if he takes me down again, to switch arms on the arm bar, try and like trick him on the arm bar a little bit. And I'm like, I'm just going to kick him.
Okay.
And literally all my brain is doing is, okay, when he dips that shoulder, I'm going to kick him in the head. That's
it.
Literally,
that's zoned in. That's the plan.
So I know exactly, because what's he going to do? The thing that worked last time.
Got it, of course.
Why would he do anything different? He's going to try and take me down again and keep punching me.
Okay.
That's exactly what he's going to do. And he's only got the one takedown he ever does in mixed martial arts. So I'm going to wait for that shoulder to dip, and I'm going to kick him in the head. Funnily enough, my other corner man yelled kick.
Okay.
I didn't hear it. My sensei did, but he yelled kick. But yeah, I just waited, and he kind of did a little bounce in fake, but he didn't dip the shoulder. And that's what I was waiting for, was shoulder dip, because shoulder dip means reaching for my leg. And as soon as he did, I kicked him in the head, and everything went in slow motion. I saw his eyes roll back in his head, and he started to fall back, and it was literally slow motion. Like, you could see me put my leg down and kind of stop. And that's because I'm looking at the ref to stop it before he even hits the ground. And then I'm like, I guess I have to jump on him. I didn't jump on him with the intent of hitting him because I knew he was unconscious. But I'm like, I have to be there and ready,
So you won this.
I did. 11 seconds into the second round.
So happy right now. I'm sitting here like, these jerks gave you a killer your first fight. He's doing a pro debut, your first time fighting ever. And in my head, I'm like, this is the most screwed up, has to be illegal, full of crap promotion BS I've ever heard in my life. And you came out and knocked him out in the beginning of the second.
Because, what I figured out was by the end of the first round, the adrenaline had calmed down, and I could tell my tunnel vision was gone.
Okay.
So I knew my range again. So I'm like, okay, now I can kick him.
There we go.
Which was my intent anyway, was to capitalize on that big gaping hole in his guard when he goes for that takedown. Of course, the commentators, all considered it to be a lucky shot. And all of his friends told him it was a lucky shot. I believe he got knocked out in his next fight too. It's important to not assume things are lucky when you get knocked unconscious.
And not just insane preparation for the one thing you do wrong all the time.
Right.
Yes.
I saw a trend. I trained for the trend. But it was a little weird because it did take them. They had to strap him to a spine board and everything to get him out of the ring. Because I twisted his head around pretty good. But there was debate on what I hit him with. Because from different angles and different cameras, it looked like different things.
Okay.
So from one angle, it looks like I kicked him in the head. From another angle, it looks like I kicked him in the body. And from another angle, it looks like I kneed him in the head.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Right. But remember, amateur.
Okay, no. Okay. No. They can't announce this man for his pro debut and then get mad at you, even if you did throw a Ben Askren flying knee. I mean, not Ben Askren. I just called it Ben Askren flying knee. That's messed up. Should call it Masvidal. But anyway, a flying knee to the head. He's a pro now. That's not fair.
I would tend to agree, but that's and technically they didn't say that was what was the holdup. But the only thing that I could figure out why 3 different officials would come up to me asking what I hit him with and why they'd constantly be going back and checking the video. The only reason I could think of was because they were looking to see if I was disqualified. I couldn't think of any other reason they would keep checking.
Yeah.
And I literally had to point at the red spot on my leg where I hit him.
And be like, it's marked. It's right.
Yeah.
Here. Oh my
God. This red spot hit him in the chin. I don't know what you want me to do. And they did find the one camera angle that showed me kicking him in the head. So that worked out, but it was a little bit odd. And you could tell that they definitely thought that it was, kind of a fluke, but they did also replay my knockout throughout the entire night. It was knockout of the night. So
okay.
There you
go.
That was pretty cool.
Your knockout of the night was against a pro who they shouldn't have put you up against in the first place. That's one way to do it. Right. Right. And the thing was I wanted to do one more at least, because I'm like, I'm not happy with how I did in the first round. And now I know what the adrenaline does to me in that situation, and it stretches everything out. Now I know. Now I can be ready. But shortly thereafter, I started having other health problems and things like that. So it got to a point where a doctor wouldn't clear me to do an MMA fight now. Okay.
So I can't do another one, but I can train people for them. But I do think it would have been more fun to fight the guy that I had been set up with before that wrestler.
Okay.
Because he was from a legit MMA gym, but he'd never had a fight before either. It was going to be his debut. From what I understood, his fight was a lot of clinching,
okay,
which is perfect for me since that's where all my kata stuff happens.
Okay.
So that would have been great. I could have actually showcased a lot of, old school karate stuff
in there. That would have been, yeah.
Whereas with the wrestler, I knew the only time I was going to get the chance to do that is like up against the cage. Is if we ended up against the cage standing up, yeah. I could use it there. But otherwise, I knew he was going to try and take me down, and the easiest way to stop him was to knock him out. So I knew I didn't have really room to play in that fight. It wasn't going to be so much like okay, let's play with different stuff, see what we can do. It was very much going to be okay, no, I just need to end this real fast.
Yeah,
if at all possible.
You get out as fast and best you can.
So they did immediately call me Shotokan. The commentators did, because it's the only karate they know.
And so they just did you
Um,
a Shotokan karate guy, or did
yeah.
they do it? Oh, okay. Well,
Now, funny thing about that though, the referee knew I was a Shorin-ryu guy.
okay.
The referee does Shorin-ryu.
Hey, there we go.
a different branch entirely. Like we're not connected or anything. It's not like there's favoritism there, but it was just a neat thing of I saw a tattoo on his arm. That was I think Matsubayashi-ryu.
Okay.
And as Shorin-ryu goes, they're fairly different from what I've learned. But like, I was like, hey, I recognize that. It's like, yeah. I think he used to do Shorin-ryu.
Okay.
But yeah, it was still kind of a neat thing. So he knew I did Shorin-ryu. But yeah, the commentators definitely didn't. And you could tell from their little post-fight interview that was a nice kick. You could tell that they're just like, you were gonna lose. I had a feeling they like bet against me or something. Like
their attitudes are like,
yeah, it was very much like a you shouldn't have won, kid.
I feel like if they are setting up someone for a pro debut against a guy who's just starting with no experience, and if they're coming out any kind of biased, they're not going to think, oh, he doesn't even train at an MMA gym. He only does karate at this one place. They're probably, it sounds like they were trying to feed this guy a win. Like he was how it was fully set up from the beginning.
Feed him a can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing to me, though, is that this guy didn't even train at an MMA gym either.
Good point.
He was a state champion wrestler, but he worked striking with some guy at a like LA Fitness or something like that. So, but I think the fact that he had his 3 straight wins, they probably did see him as, up and coming prospect that we want to promote. I could definitely see that, but
this is wild.
I felt at least reasonably comfortable even with him having those wins because I watched his footage.
Okay.
And I was like, yes, he won. Interestingly, one of the guys he beat was a Wing Chun guy.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, after watching his footage, I felt relatively comfortable fighting him. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's got more of the wrestling base, but as far as striking goes, he's not very good at it. Wrestlers hit hard, but that's because they're used to putting their whole body weight into a thing.
Yeah.
So it just translates into power anyway. But as far as technique goes, I wasn't impressed with his striking ability. And I figured, okay, well, I have been grappling for a long time. I'll probably be relatively all right. I can, at least defensively, I can hold my own with like blue and purple belts in BJJ and not get tapped out.
Oh, okay.
At least not very often.
Okay. That's
of course,
good because as someone who's just now really getting into BJJ, I can tell you I have just accepted that I'm going to get smashed for 2 years straight and just to live with it.
Well, and to be fair, after the last year of not being able to grapple with anybody, who knows? I'll probably go back in there and get wipe the floor by a blue belt. But back then, at the time, I couldn't. Now, to be fair, I couldn't tap them out.
Okay, but you
my offensive grappling was not good enough to beat them, but I could reasonably prevent them from tapping me out most of the time.
Okay.
And that was something. And I didn't get too often to do cross training with BJJ people, but I did here and there. And it was hard for them to tap me out. So that's something, for people who focus all their time grappling and I only do it part-time. I'll call that a win.
Okay.
I'm not looking to be, BJJ black belt level grappler for what I'm doing. If you have to defend yourself in an assault by a black belt in BJJ, something has gone seriously wrong.
There is a yeah.
Like I can totally see somebody with a couple years of BJJ still having enough of that attitude to, you know, go out there and try and mug somebody. And I could see that to a degree. But at a certain point,
You hope that the consistent training and the humility that comes from what it takes to get to that black belt would have tamed you a little bit.
right.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't think it's necessary for karate practitioners and people interested in self-defense to be brown and black belt level BJJ grapplers by any stretch of the imagination. If you've got a basic understanding of grappling, if you can at least beat the white belts, you're fine.
Yeah.
If you have enough grappling to go to a BJJ school and handle the white belts well enough, you're all right. That's plenty, because you're not going to have to deal with that any more than that, really. And
street situation, most likely.
Right. And also, we'll be hitting people.
I would just say a blue belt, you drop some levels when you're getting punched in the face and you're not used to it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I figure if you can handle the white belts, you know, in just grappling, well enough, start hitting them, and you're all right. You're fine.
Yeah. No. I get you. I mean, I know there are people when I'm, you know, doing my trainings, like say that we're doing stand up. Now I won't call it wrestling because you can take judo throws, whatever. But it's like, if I can throw knees, I'm good enough that you're not getting me here. It's just as I can't throw elbows, I can't throw knees. None of my offense is available. So right. I know that there's a whole different level. You can beat me here in your rule set, but if there's no rule set or it's a more open rule set, I still got this. So yeah, I understand.
And that is why I am a fan of MMA, and I think that it is a really good format for old style karate as well. Mm-hmm. Because no, it's not a self-defense scenario. It's not the right context. You know, karate was designed for defending yourself and your loved ones against assault, or for arresting people and law enforcement types of activities. So it's not the right context, but it is also the most open rule set that we have for a competitive fighting system of any kind.
Agreed.
Which means you can do the most stuff in it.
Yep.
Which means you can do the most things from your kata in it. You know, a karate tournament is a terrible, absolutely
of
horrendous representation of karate.
It really is.
Okay, think of the techniques you use in a karate tournament. Your back fist, your reverse punch, your roundhouse kick. Some people are doing the hook kicks, pretty popular in WKF. Cool. Four things. That is a terrible representation of karate. Yeah, you can do foot sweeps and the occasional throw of not a good approach to throws, but the throw, you know, you might have somebody throw a side kick or a front kick here and there, but overall, you're looking at four main techniques that people use in sport karate competitions, and it's not a good representation of karate's curriculum. MMA gives you a whole range of opportunities to work that material in. Yeah, you've got the long range stuff in MMA, so you still need to have your ability to cover distance, your jabs and back fists, your reverse punches, your long kicks. You still need all that for MMA, and you don't need that necessarily for self-defense, because self-defense stays closer most of the time.
Yeah.
But MMA allows you to fight at close range without stopping you. And there's the threat of being taken to the ground, because it's allowed. They won't stop you.
Very real threat in real life.
Right. So is it a place you want to go? No. So you should probably be pretty good at not going there, shouldn't you? You know, and
that is a great. Okay, so what you just said, that whole thought, that fallacy within karate schools, the way you just broke that down, I know a lot of schools like we don't. Why do you need jujitsu on high level? Street fights, you go to the ground and multiple people, you're going to die. You don't ever want to take it to the ground. But you make a good point. They don't have takedown. It's not like you're working the takedown defense and how to get back up and to stand up from those positions. That's a good point that I never even recognized. That's a really good point. All right.
Yeah, I mean, my sensei liked to say that if you want to be good at punching things, you have to punch things.
Yep.
You get a lot of people who, practice their kata and their kion in the air, and they never hit pads, and they never hit bags, and they never hit each other. Well, the same thing is true of any other technique that you're going to work. If you want to be good at doing it, you have to actually do it. And if one of the things you're worried about is being taken to the ground, that means you need to actually have people try to take you to the ground. And if you're worried about getting stuck on the ground, you need to have people try and keep you there. And you need to train against that. And we got as far as having people actually like pile on to you in my sensei's dojo. Like, you'd lay down on the floor and he'd have people come up with like body shields and just crowd over and be all around you and try to keep you down by pushing you down and keep pressure on you. So even without strikes, because we did that with different kinds of sparring, but this was just literally a pressure training scenario. You've got 5 people with body shields trying to keep you crammed onto the floor. Get up. Even something as simple as that.
That sounds very not simple. That sounds extremely difficult. Like,
well, it's difficult. It's still simple. Like, it's not complicated. It's just not easy.
It's just not easy, yeah.
But that kind of thing, a lot of people don't want to do. And that's where you get a lot of you could just stop them from taking you down by doing this. Have you ever had somebody try to take you down?
I'm shaking my head.
Yeah, it's easy to say that.
All the time. I just knee him in the face. I'm like, would you though?
And sometimes that can work.
Yes,
it can.
It can.
But
Oscar knows.
But you know how you get to the point where that works?
Practice.
You try it against people who are trying to take you down,
yeah.
And you fail a lot. You get taken down. That's how that happens.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times people have kneed me in sparring, and then I threw them on the ground. That's what happens, and that's how you get better at not getting taken down. But you've got to be willing to do it. And there are some people who find alternatives. But the overall thing, though, is still, if you want to say that you're defending against something,
you have to practice.
You have to train actually against it.
Yep.
And that means you have to teach your students how to do it.
Yep.
Too. Like, you can't just go, oh, well, if a bad guy tries to do this to you and then never teach your students how to do it properly.
That's not. Especially when you think about it, in America, wrestling is a sport. It's a high school sport. It's everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's like, it might be the most taught martial art
in America. It absolutely, absolutely it is. Interestingly, there's some karate in football in America. So that's a neat little tidbit.
I'm unaware of this. Interesting.
I think in the 70s, some NFL teams brought in some karate instructors and started having them learn some karate techniques. So you can actually see some. So you can actually see some football players do like parry pass kind of stuff.
Oh, that's crazy! Oh, I had no idea.
And they literally brought it in from karate.
That's hilarious. Oh, that's great. Okay.
So that's cool. Okay. But that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, as a martial art goes, it's wrestling in America by far. And yeah, if you're just like, oh, and if they try to take you down, you do this. But you never actually, with intent, try to take each other down.
Then it doesn't count, really. It's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah. So yes, it might work eventually.
Yeah.
but it doesn't just magically work because you know it's there.
You have to be drilling it against real life people. And one thing that I noticed as I, have been sparring and training more and more advanced people for my competition stuff, some of the stuff that you're training against when you're drilling with people with better and higher skill, they're not even things that you can almost like explain verbally. Like, as I say, a kick is a kick. But for some reason, when a beginner does a kick, I do a kick. And when Eddie Abasolo, who's like one of the top Muay Thai fighters in the country, does a kick, they're different things. Like, they don't like I remember this. I was boxing, I was messing around. I'm not the boxing, I'm not the best boxer, but I can throw hands. I train boxing. I can block a jab. I get in there with this kid who's like an amateur champ. This is a few years back. I like to believe he won't be able to do this to me today. But we're in there, and it's like he throws a jab, and I'm like, hold on. He did it again. I'm like, wait. I know how to block. I blocked these before. As my head dropped back consistently off one move. I'm like, but I blocked these. I know what I'm supposed to do. But there's levels, and it's not even something you can like always understand from explaining. It's just like that person understands movement. So you could be working to defend a takedown, be able to defend the takedown of a lot of people. For example, again, I was in our Sambo class with Alexis Davis, who fights in the UFC. And yeah, so I'm working with her, and the instructor partners me with her. And one guy tried to take me, I stuff a little bit of a takedown. Like I stand up for a little bit. And the instructor wasn't watching, right? So Alexis comes up and he's like, all right, you guys are gonna drill this. I want you to stop her from taking you down. Now notice Alexis is a black belt in both Japanese and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and as I said, fights in the UFC. And I'm out here like, I know kind of how to do this. I'm gonna last at least, I'm a big, strong dude. I'm so stupid. I'm a big, strong dude, right? I don't think I stood up for a full 10 seconds before I was on. Honestly, I think 10 seconds, saying I stood up for 10 seconds, I think I'm giving myself a lot of leeway. By a factor of probably 5 seconds. I probably lasted less than 5. It was really quick. And so you just understand, like, there's levels to it.
Oh, yeah.
Levels.
Oh, yeah. And, it's to say that I've done, could stop the blue belts and purple belts that I have, rolled with from tapping me out, isn't to say that other blue belts or purple belts wouldn't have tapped me out just fine, because some people are just better at certain things
than others.
Yeah. So it just depends on the person. The martial art doesn't do the fighting. It's just the tool set that a person uses. So yeah, it's always a little different depending on who you're working with, but it all boils down to the same kind of thing, though, is if you want to be good at doing something, you have to actually do it. And if it relies on another person doing something to you,
they have to be good at it.
You need somebody actually trying to do that to you who's better than you, ideally.
Yes.
For you to get better.
Yeah.
If they're, full-heartedly trying to take you down, but they're just not good at takedowns, you won't get as good as you will you working that takedown defense against, the Division I grappler.
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere. So I'm not saying you necessarily need to start with the Division I grappler. But, and there's also the limitations of your school. And that's where a lot of the cross training really becomes beneficial, because you can go train with other people and see how other people do things. And you don't get that big fish in a small pond syndrome going on, because it's easy when you're like, oh yeah, I can beat everybody in the gym.
You're in the wrong gym
until you go to somebody else's gym and the floor gets mopped with you.
Yeah.
So it's important to get out there and work with other people, so you have an actual sense of reality.
No, 100%. I would say if you're in a place, I don't like being the best person in the gym if it's a place where I'm trying to learn. Like you can't grow at your fastest if you're not surrounded you want people worse than you, people equal to you, and people better than you at all times. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
It worked out well with my sensei being close to my age, but so much better than me.
Hi.
Because it wasn't one of those situations where I'm, my instructor is 30 years older than me and can't really spar with me, because I'm the young tough kid.
Yeah.
He was tougher than me and stronger than me and faster than me and better than me and just at everything. With the exception of throws, I was better than him at throwing people.
Interesting.
Which he acknowledged. I'm not saying that to be cocky. That's what he told me. Which is specifically why he tried not to let me grab him.
He was like, we're not going there. Wasn't gonna give
But he did. Like, we still did.
Gotcha.
But like, he acknowledged, because there were certain throws. There's mainly Harai Goshi is my go-to throw. And I'm big enough and strong enough that if I really want to get a Harai Goshi and you don't know how to stop it, or you're just small enough, because he was lighter than me by a good bit. So unless he caught it early enough, it could be hard for him to stop me from the throws. He usually still could. So
as you explain it, so I'm new to the throwing terminology. I'm just now getting into that.
Sweeping hip throws is Harai Goshi. So
Harai
Goshi is a hip throw where you then swing one of your legs up backward, and that helps flip them over.
Okay, gotcha. I think
it's not Uchimata where your leg goes between theirs, but it's similar in mechanics.
Okay.
That was kind of my go-to. He's still way better than me in general, and even though he would tell me that I was better at throwing than him, it's not like I threw him very often.
Gotcha.
He still stopped me from doing it most of the time.
Got you. But
he had some. It was just one of those. He didn't really try to throw me because I was comfortable enough with the throwing that I don't think he really felt like he needed to try and do that.
Okay.
So he mostly beat the crap out of me instead, which was great fun.
We're just gonna use our hands.
like get in close and start throwing, body shots and elbows. And if I tried to take him down, he did counter me periodically. So he made sure he was in a better position when we landed, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Definitely still better than me. Having one thing you're good at doesn't necessarily.
Yeah. No, fighting is a multitude of things. Getting one up is not going to win you the fight.
Yeah.
Definitely get it.
But so overall, in general, I had to work against somebody who was so much better than me at everything.
Gotcha.
Was really beneficial. But it was funny because he did spar with his students, which some people frown upon.
I've heard that. I don't understand why that would be a bad thing. Unless you're trying to hide.
Right. The sensei's supposed to be untouchable or some kind of thing. He hated that, and he figured, it keeps him sharp too if he's getting in there and mixing it up.
The best senseis that I know, if they're not extremely on the older side,
right,
they still spar with their.
Yeah. There comes a point where you need to tone that down because of your health. But yeah. But I remember one time in particular that we were sparring, and he threw a hook kick to my head and hit me with it. But I grabbed it, and then I took him down.
Oh God! Okay.
Now,
how do you?
He reversed it. He reversed it on the ground and started elbowing me in the head. I didn't stay very long, but it was still that fact that I caught it and took him down. Somebody got mad that I took him down
because he's the instructor. That's the cult ideal.
Well,
that
because he's the instructor, and because if he hadn't pulled his kick, I would have been unconscious, was their thought process.
Well, okay, is that
and I'm thinking, well, maybe you don't know that.
That's true.
That's true. Yes, maybe it would have knocked me out, but how does it benefit him to assume that I would be?
That's true. Because if you get
how does it benefit him to have me stop because I got hit, because it would have knocked me out? What if it didn't knock me out? Well, I'd grab it and throw you on the ground. So you need to be ready, right? That's
there are crazy. I mean, what's his name? Rod Tang. I don't know if you know who that is. He's a one championship Muay Thai fighter. All he does like punches, put him on my chin. Let's see, kick me in the head. Let's see if I can take it. It just doesn't. I don't care. I'm going for it. You fight that guy. He's taking your hook kick to the head, and it doesn't matter. So
right. Well, and on top of that, okay, yes, that time his hook kick did land like right around my temple, and yes, it very well might have knocked me out. But the thing is, too, an inch farther, and I would have been, not knocked out, maybe, or in any direction. So you can't just assume, oh, I made contact and I'm good.
Yeah.
That's why all the people who only do point fighting get overwhelmed when you have them do continuous contact sparring.
They're used to that stop the moment they touch anything.
Yep, you would be knocked out. That's the mentality of the point fighting, is that you hit them first and they would have you did your one hit kill, they're done.
Yeah,
and so you get to stop and restart.
You don't.
That's not how real life works.
Yeah.
And so inevitably, the people who only train that way, they are really bad at continuous fighting most of the time. So yeah, they might hit you first, but if they pause because they hit you first, then well, you just keep hitting them and then you throw them on the ground or whatnot.
Yeah.
So
no, I definitely get you on that. That being said, we were supposed to do this for an hour. I have training in 10 minutes. When we start talking about Sambo, I start looking at the clock. I was like, oh, it starts at 5. I gotta get out of here.
All right.
Yeah. But dude, I just want to say thank you very much for coming on and talking. I would love to have you on another time. I mean, this is a good conversation. Sure. You are probably the easiest person I've had to interview, because like I had a list of things to ask questions that we just kind of flowed and went. And I thought it would be an hour, and we're out here almost at 3 hours in almost. So
I do that sometimes.
Yeah. Definitely
might need to edit it down.
Yeah, no, I'll chop it up into clips, put it up there. I'll let you know when it gets up. And just again, thank you for taking the time out. Hopefully I get to train with you at some point. I know my sensei loves you in general, and I know at some point he's gonna want to come out and train. So I'm gonna try my best to see if I can tag along, because I would love to get some work in with you. So yeah,
sounds fun.
Okay. But yeah, I gotta run. So I will talk to you later. Thank you.
Talk to you later. Have fun.